There's this rise of the broligarchy and bro politics at the moment,
which is fascinating.
I think it's really interesting, but this prioritization of doing good over looking good, of sort of efficiency over optics. And, this is one of those examples, I think, where both have gone awry, both the thing that you did and the way that it was done and the way that it was led up to. But in stark contrast to Vivek Ramaswamy doing debate prep with his top off, hitting forehands on a tennis court, or Elon Musk, sending rockets into space, sort of a world of people doing things. Even if you don't agree with the things, you can't deny that they're doing stuff. And I wonder what the medium-term future looks like now for America.
Well, I think one of the most important things of the broligarchy in terms of its impact is that so many young men gravitated to it because they've been feeling lost. You've talked about this a lot. I've talked to you about this a lot. I've got 3 sons from 23 to 31. I've seen it firsthand, how they've been struggling, not just my sons, but their friendship group have been struggling to understand what it means to be a man in this weird age that we're now in. Social media driven age, virtue signaling driven age, a weird time when losing is almost more celebrated than winning, where the old alpha male chest beating is now seen as something to be ashamed of, where weakness is almost now seen as a greater characteristic than strength. And I have been on this for years, thinking this is a ruinous way for society to go. And suddenly, along in America, you have this group of very alpha male guys, all chest beaters, from RFK Jr. to Elon to Trump to Vivek to Joe Rogan, all of them. Very strong-minded guys. To a lesser degree, in a different space, Andrew Tate and his brother, who wield extraordinary influence, but I think have a streak of blatant misogyny in Andrew's case, which I really don't like. But a lot of the reason for his appeal is that lost young men gravitated to him because he was pounding a drum of take care of yourself, be proud of being successful, aspire to be better than you currently are, etc. And that resonates with people. I'd add Jordan Peterson to the.
I was going to say, even though Jordan's not a massive fan of Andrew, the message in principle isn't that different.
No, and the message is be proud to be a man again. You've been ashamed of being a man for many years now, since the avalanche of Me Too, of Time's Up, which absolutely had an important role in society in correcting a historic imbalance in the gender, no question, and historically bad behavior by a lot of men towards women. I absolutely do not denigrate either of those movements. But what it did do, as I knew it would do, the pendulum swung so far the other way that actually it freaked the hell out of young guys. And they were suddenly like, what am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to behave? And women listening to this might think, well, it's easy. You know how to behave. Actually, it's not that easy. Particularly if you've been conditioned to think that being a man is X, Y, Z, and suddenly you're told all those things are things to be ashamed of. And now we've had the pendulum swing back a little bit, and you're seeing a sort of corrective balance where I think people have begun to work out where the boundaries are, where the lines are, to a degree. I think it's still complex out there. And you're seeing it at the moment with the whole Greg Wallace scandal in the UK. And, for American viewers, very simply, he's a guy who does a cooking show on TV, who's been very laddish for 20 years or so. And now that laddishness has come back to be used as a stick to beat him. And he said a lot of things which are pretty unpalatable to women who've now ganged up to complain about him. But again, that raises that whole area of workplace banter, workplace relationships, right? I mean, I read that until 10 years ago, 40% of all marriages began with a workplace romance. That stat cannot exist today, because how does it start? Historically, it would be a guy in a superior position with a woman in a lesser position. That's historically because of the gender imbalance in the workplace. So how do people meet now at work? They're not really allowed to. So what happens then? Then you gravitate to dating apps. They're going out of fashion too.
They seem to create a flimsier relationship as well. They drop off more quickly.
Yeah, and that's, you're seeing that their popularity is decreasing. So I do think, well, how are people meeting each other, actually?
With difficulty.
Yeah.
Elon said cancel culture had been cancelled.
Yeah.
Something you'd been harping on about for a while. You think that's true?
Well, I like the idea of it. I certainly think that when you've got a thumping win for a guy like Donald Trump, who's been helped over the line by people like Elon, like Joe Rogan and others, who simply don't tolerate or believe in the concept of cancel culture. That's incredibly powerful. And I think you send a message to the woke world. And I always temper this kind of part of a discussion about wokeism by saying when wokeism originally began back in the 60s in America, it came out of music actually, and it was a clarion call for people to be more aware of social and racial injustice. By that criteria alone, I'm woke, happy to be woke. It's just the way it's been hijacked in the last 10 years by what I call them fascists. They hate it because they hate fascists. But I say, do you not understand that when you operate on a principle of cancel culture, of virtue signaling, of fact-devoid bullshit about things like supporting trans athletes in women's sport to the point where it just destroys the integrity of women's sport irrevocably, when you pound those drums, actually you're behaving like a fascist, where you want people to think like you, to act like you, to speak like you, to have the same values, to have the same principles, to have the same heroes, to read the same books, to watch the same movies, to laugh at the same jokes. And if you deviate, we're going to destroy you. That's fascism, actually. And they don't seem to either understand that or they're in denial. But this election's a big wake-up call because I think this election was, you had Kamala Harris, progressive, pretty far left progressive throughout her entire political career, desperately trying to move to the centre when she became the nominee. But it was all too late because the receipts were there. And the receipts were used against her, memorably in that trans ad that the Trump campaign did, which they reckon moved the needle by up to 3 points, where it simply ended with Kamala Harris is for they, them, Donald Trump is for you. That was very simple but very effective because actually personal pronouns are bullshit. And we all kind of know they're bullshit. And now I've noticed on my emails, people have stopped using them because they now realize actually it's made them look a little bit ridiculous, particularly those who insist on calling themselves they. As Joe Rogan said about Sam Smith, there's only one of you, buddy.
Yeah, do you think it's a repudiation of that? Obviously, you've made the claim that wokeism's dead and identity politics is dead and virtue signaling is dead. And
well, I think the concepts are dead. The actual execution of the death may take some time, but I do think that if it wasn't dead, you'd have seen a massive victory for a progressive far left candidate in Kamala Harris, who pretended she wasn't, but actually is to her bootstraps, and she got wiped out. And I think that that's an indication of three things. One, Americans trusted Trump to fix the economy and illegal immigration better than they trusted her to do that. Secondly, there's something about him on the world stage, the swagger that Trump brings to the office, which annoys a lot of people, but he's actually quite effective. And I think that was partly in people's minds, particularly when he put his fist up after being shot. He showed the world that the potential president of the United States was a badass, strong guy. And I think that moment may have won him the election when we look back in history to that moment, particularly when he then got back on a debate stage the week later, a rally stage, and did it all over again in front of 20,000 complete strangers. I spoke to him that night. He rang me because he'd seen me talk about it on Fox. And I said, I got to say, whether people love you or hate, that is a badass statement of personal courage. And he was interesting because he actually said in that call, you know, I knew if I didn't get back out there now, I might never get back out there, which I thought was an interesting. You don't often hear Trump.
A little bit of vulnerability.
A little bit, where he kind of knew himself.
In other news, this episode is brought to you by Nomadic. Traveling should be about the journey and not the chaos of packing, which is why I partnered with Nomadic. Their Travel Pack and Carry-On Pro have genuinely changed my entire life when it comes to being on the road. They've got compartments for everything: laptop, shoes, sunglasses. It's so well organized that even your toothbrush will feel important. It's like the Marie Kondo of luggage. Everything has its place. Best of all, their products will last you literally a lifetime with their lifetime guarantee. So this is the final backpack that you'll ever need to buy. And you can return or exchange any product within 30 days for any reason. So you can buy your new bag, try it for a month, and if you don't like it, they will give you your money back. Right now, you can get a 20% discount and see everything I use and recommend by going to the link in the description below or heading to nomatic.com/modernwisdom. That's nomatic.com/modernwisdom. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip with Piers, watch the full-length podcast in all its glory right here. Go on.